What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at some strategies for optimally drafting your team in Best Ball Mania 4 on Underdog Fantasy. We are partnered with Underdog to bring you fantasy football content all spring and summer long, leading into the Week 1 kickoff in early September. If you are not yet a member of Underdog, you can use the link below to sign up using the promo code OCCUPY1, and we will match 100% of your first deposit up to $100. So that means you get up to $200 to start playing in contests like Best Ball Mania 4 with a $3 million prize to first place. Now, we've done some live streams on this channel for about a month now for this upcoming NFL season. And between myself and my co-host Chuck, Brian, who obviously runs the website here, Moose, Ken, who has appeared on some of our streams, we have started to identify some of our favorite ways to attack drafts from different pick slots that you get. So that is the number one thing that you do not control when you sit down to draft in a tournament contest. The draft pick number you get is completely randomized. So what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about the optimal approach that you can take from whatever pick number you receive. In this video, I'm going to talk about what you can do from the number 1, number 2, and number 3 pick slots. Over the next few weeks, we will talk about how to approach your drafts from the other positions. So keep an eye out for future videos on this channel that go through that. Now, for the purpose of this exercise, I am going to use two tools on the OccupyFantasy.com website that we think are really strong. The ADP tracker for Best Ball Mania. So we are scraping the ADP from Underdog's API, and we are looking at shifts in player draft position over the last week. I am going to treat ADP as if it is how we would select the first round player that we receive. So from the number 1 spot, we're going to take Justin Jefferson today. From the number 2 slot, we're going to take Jamar Chase today. And from the number 3 slot, we are going to take Christian McCaffrey. Now, if we get the number 1 pick, this is going to be your best chance to land Justin Jefferson because his average draft position is 1.1 this season. Justin Jefferson does not often fall to the second pick. However, Jamar Chase you could take at the second pick, maybe the third pick or the first pick. So less optionality with a player like Jefferson in these drafts. So that's why I think it makes sense when you get the number 1 pick to just side with ADP and take Justin Jefferson. Now, the ADP tracker here shows us one view of how to consider stacking Vikings players with Justin Jefferson. We can see the ADP of his teammates. We know that TJ Hawkinson is going to go late 4th, early 5th round. Wide receiver 2, rookie Jordan Addison will go shortly after him. Ambiguous running back situation here with Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in the 7th round. But what this tool here falls short of doing is what our next tool available under the Best Ball menu on OccupyFantasy.com corrects. The Stack Seeker. So this is a really powerful visualization. I recommend having this tab open when you're doing drafts. If we do select Justin Jefferson with the first pick, we can come into the Stack Seeker tool, again, available under the Best Ball high-level menu on the website, Underdog Stack Seeker, second item down. And we can see that Justin Jefferson and his Vikings teammates have playoff games this season against the Cincinnati Bengals, the Detroit Lions in Week 16, and the Green Bay Packers in the all-important Week 17 championship week. Why do we care about this? Well, we obviously want to stack in Week 17. I think everybody who consumes any best ball content from any provider knows that. But we also want to consider having these stacks in the first round of the playoffs and the semifinals as well, because you are playing a single week tournament at that point in the season, and we want to maximize the chances of being invested in the best game environment on the board. So knowing that Justin Jefferson goes first overall and that his Week 15 opponent is the Cincinnati Bengals, in my ideal draft start from the number 1 pick, I'm taking Justin Jefferson at number 1, and I am hoping that I can get T. Higgins at the 2-3 turn from the Cincinnati Bengals. We have that Bengals game in the first week of the playoffs. Our Stack Seeker allows us to look at multiple teams at once. So if I have Jefferson and Higgins in my lineup, I want to see what the rest of the board looks like once I bring in the Cincinnati Bengals. We have the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Bengals in that final week of the season, the all-important Week 17. some Pittsburgh Steelers correlation with Bengals players in Week 16, and of course the Vikings correlation in Week 15. So those are some secondary and tertiary stacks we should consider once we have started this particular way. So at the third pick, I would like to take a running back here. There are 3 that are viable. The 3 that are most likely to still be available are Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Ramondre Stevenson here at pick 25. My favorite one on my ranking sheet is Derrick Henry. Obviously, these fantasy point projections here are mine in my own personal rankings. I do think Henry has a little more upside than those two, but obviously you may feel differently. I would look at this as just best running back available. And again, the general rule for this type of strategy video is I am trying to take players that are likely to still be there at ADP. All of these guys on this fictional 8-man start to a number 1 pick roster should theoretically still be available. When things come back around to us at the 4-5 turn, TJ Hawkinson is my number 2 tight end in my personal rankings and goes right around pick 48, pairs nicely with Justin Jefferson. So I think you want to consider Hawkinson early if you're stacking the Vikings, which I do think you should do if you get Jefferson first overall. Aaron Jones, the next pick, a little early by ADP, but one of the things to keep in mind is that players will come around to you that will definitely not be available by the time the board comes back around to you. Jones, although he is going 54th overall currently, will definitely not be there in the round 6-7 turn. And the reason I would like to put him in my ideal number 1 pick draft lineup here is because of that Week 17 correlation with the Minnesota Vikings. We get a little bit of a championship game stack here if we can get Kirk Cousins double stack with Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, and then hope we get a lot of production on the ground with Aaron Jones. You don't have to take Aaron Jones here. You could always lean towards A.J. Dillon at the 8-9 turn, which is where I have Kirk Cousins slotted in the 8th round, and go a different direction here with the 5th round pick. But I'm a little more excited about Aaron Jones in that backfield than A.J. Dillon this year. And this is a roster construction where I think it makes sense to prioritize Aaron Jones. Deontay Johnson and Isaiah Pacheco. Why are they on this board? Well, the Stack Seeker reminds us that the Cincinnati Bengals have a matchup with the Chiefs in Week 17. So getting Pacheco here in the 7th round at pick 73, slightly ahead of ADP, correlates with my T. Higgins selection here on this number 1 pick roster. I would prefer to get Kadarius Toney here if he is still available, but his ADP is 70.5 right now, so it's not a slam dunk that he's still available. It's probably less than a 50% chance he's still available here, but that is something that I would keep in mind, is I would like to take someone like Toney ahead of Pacheco because I think there's more upside there. Deontay Johnson, probably the number 1 regression candidate at wide receiver this season. 0 touchdowns last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Goes here at the 6-7 turn quite frequently right next to teammate George Pickens. So if we miss out on Deontay Johnson and we want Pittsburgh correlation with our lineup, we can still lean towards George Pickens in this particular slot. And we want that Pittsburgh correlation with the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's a little bit about how to draft out of the number 1 position, prioritizing Justin Jefferson. What about the number 2 slot if you get Jamar Chase? So we start with the Bengals. We see Jamar Chase clearly as the number 2 pick, consensus number 2 pick on the board that is available. And we have correlations with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs to keep in mind. Now this approach is going to look pretty similar to the approach from the number 1 pick, except we obviously do not have Justin Jefferson on this roster any longer. I do like doubling up with Chase and Higgins because we're playing a tournament. We're trying to beat over 600,000 people. And if we're building this way, we are saying, okay, the Bengals are going to be the best offense in the league this season. Give me exposure to the clear top flight weapons. And let's hope that we are correct here. Now you notice on this roster, after I lock up the 2 Bengals wide receivers, I did go with Stevenson ahead of Derrick Henry. Once again, I think all of these guys are interchangeable, but one of the things I wanted to discuss at some point in this video is if we use our Stack Seeker and we layer in the Patriots on top of these Bengals Chiefs stacks that we're looking to build out, we actually see that the Patriots have a matchup with the Chiefs, and then they also have a matchup with the high upside Buffalo Bills, Denver Broncos, Stevenson does fit with your secondary chief stack if you are stacking the Cincinnati Bengals like we would be doing here out of the number 2 position. Hawkinson at 47 is an extremely interesting choice here. I have typically taken Burrow at 47 if he falls to me. The bet that I would be making with this particular build, and why this would be considered an ideal start, although a slightly unlikely one given ADP for Burrow, if you slam Chase and Higgins at the top of the draft, the owner who has the number 1 pick likely has Justin Jefferson, a couple of running backs near the top, and they probably need some wide receivers at this point. If you take away their ability to stack Hawkinson with Justin Jefferson, you're in theory reducing some of the upside stack for one of your opponents in your 12-man pool here, but you are also getting that week 15 correlation with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the rest of the Cincinnati Bengals with one of the top tight ends available on the board, and you're setting yourself up to be able to build out a 2 tight end roster, maximize some shots at some other positions, which is why I like this. And then the other thing that you're betting on here is as long as Joe Burrow has fallen to you at 47, then maybe there's a chance he falls to you at 50 as well. So I think this might be the most reachy thing here in this ideal start. The safer thing to do may be to take Burrow at 47 and hope the reverse happens. Hawkinson falls to you at 50, or you can go best player available after that. But I think from the perspective of ideal start, if you're able to pull off a start like this in your first 5 picks with the Bengals, Stevenson, or your favorite running back, and then Hawkinson, you're in a pretty good position to succeed here. Rounding out at the 6-7 turn, same thing we talked about with our pick from the number 1 position. Pittsburgh correlation with the Bengals in week 16, and of course, that ever important week 17 correlation with Isaiah Pacheco and the Kansas City Chiefs with a potential Bengals stack here. From the 2 slot, still would prefer a wide receiver over Pacheco, but that's how I would think about approaching a draft from pick number 2. Pick number 3 is where things get really interesting because I don't think anyone has a high degree of confidence in who the San Francisco 49ers quarterback is going to be throughout the season. So I don't think Christian McCaffrey is a player that I am looking to stack with his quarterback, with some of his wide receivers, with the tight ends, but we should still be looking to maximize upside of our highest upside player we're locking into our lineup, and that's where the stack seeker can still be extremely helpful. So when we look at who the San Francisco 49ers play in the playoff slate of games this season, it is the Arizona Cardinals in week 15, Baltimore Ravens in week 16, and the Washington Commanders in week 17. From the 3-hole, I know Mark Andrews gets picked right around the 3-4 turn. I think I would reach for him a little early in round 3. That would get me some of my correlation in semifinals week. Terry McLaurin, probably one of my favorite wide receivers in general right now because I think he's still going a little too low in drafts. Scary Terry is my wide receiver 8 for the season right now in half-point fantasy football, so I really like slamming him in round 4 just in general, but love the opportunity to get him as my week 17 bring back in some Christian McCaffrey lineups this season. And then the other correlation that we can get by reaching a little early for it is James Conner in the 7th round at running back. He's my RB11 in my projections for the upcoming 2023 season. Not a ton of upside with the Arizona Cardinals this year. This offense could be less efficient, but Conner should still see a large portion of the work. Another way that you could get your Arizona Cardinals correlation with McCaffrey is Marquise Brown in the 5th round, where I've slotted in Joe Mixon. But I still like getting exposure to Bengals Chiefs in week 17 somewhere in my lineups. So that's kind of why I prioritized Mixon here in the 5th round. So where's the quarterback stack going to come from here? When you start a draft with Christian McCaffrey at the number 3 hole, the best wide receivers that are likely to still be available for you when you come back around at pick 22 in the 2nd round, we have Devontae Smith, who goes around pick 23, and Jalen Hurts is likely to already be gone at this point, so your stacking upside with a wide receiver there is capped. Obviously, another wide receiver that would still be available is T. Higgins, because we're taking him at pick 23 in our number 2 pick draft. We're taking him at pick 24 in our number 1 pick draft. I don't mind Higgins at 22, but what alters that strategy for me is not being as interested in taking Burrow at 46, 51. I do think pick 51 is where it's probably a little bit of a stretch to get Joe Burrow. The Jamar Chase owner is probably taking him once you let Joe Burrow get by you. So if you take T. Higgins here at the 3rd pick, you're leaving yourself exposed to the fact that you're not going to have an opportunity to stack your top wide receiver with his quarterback more so than you would in the other 2 slots. So the next wide receiver that's most likely to be available is DK Metcalf. Even though his ADP is a little bit closer to the middle of round 2, I like getting him here at the 22nd pick in a Christian McCaffrey number 3 overall pick lineup start, because we have a pretty good opportunity to not just pick up Metcalf, but also pick up a teammate or 2 of his along the way, including Geno Smith around the 115th pick on the board, which would be probably round 8, 9 here to make sure you get him. But there's a good chance you could get him at the 118th pick in the 10th round. Tony, finally on ADP here, pick number 70 in the 6th round over Isaiah Pacheco. I like doing that here for that correlation there. And so I didn't build this card out all the way through all 18 rounds to show you the quarterback stacks, but I can tell you just based off of starting this particular way, I would be prioritizing Geno Smith as my top flight quarterback that I can build around starting a team this way. There is more than one way to build a fantasy football roster. You know that. I know that. But we're excited to be talking about Underdog fantasy contests, particularly Best Ball Mania 4, all season long here on the Occupy channel. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll be back next week with a look at picks 4 through 6 in the draft order and how to attack the first half of the draft depending on where you land. Thank you for watching this video. We will talk to you soon.